Now let's look at types of measurement, and specifically the different types of data collection tools that you can use in order to measure your efforts in inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And largely, they fall into two different categories. There's quantitative measurement and there's qualitative measurement. Quantitative data is numbers driven. A demographic or diversity census is quantitative. It's analytical and it lacks information about a person's experience. Quantitative data defines a problem. Qualitative data provides you with that experiential data. A focus group, as an example, is qualitative. Qualitative data describes the problem. I'll break it down a little simpler. Quantitative data doesn't tell you why something's on fire, but it does tell you where to point the hose. Qualitative data helps you understand the source of the fire. The power is in having both types of data. Now, I want to show you an example of the real challenge of having data analysis done in a simplistic manner. And what I'm about to do is show you completely made up data, but it's an example of an engagement survey question and using one data point and what it looks like using multiple data points. So let's take the question, I am valued at work. Fairly common question on engagement surveys and inclusion surveys. We see it quite often. And let's say for the sake of argument for this example, we have 1,000 respondents and we get an 80% positive sentiment. That means 80% of respondents selected strongly agree or agree. And that's great. From an industry perspective, we would look at this and think 80%, it's an awesome score. People love working here. They feel valued. This is quantitative data. Now, we're going to add a layer that starts to venture into qualitative data, but is still firmly in quantitative data. Let's say we asked people to identify by their gender. And in this example, we're using the binary gender of man and woman. And for the sake of this example, we're assuming that about half of the respondent group is man and half are identified as women. And what we see is that the men respondents had a 95% positive sentiment, whereas women had 65%. This is a big concern. Based on this hypothetical, women are not feeling as valued in the organization as men. Now, because I'm me, I would never do a survey with just the binary of man and woman as gender options. So if I add in people who are gender diverse, and that can be non-binary, trans, gender non-conforming, genderqueer, etc., we see that we have a response rate of 45%. Now, it's important to point out this sample size is small. 50 people out of 1,000 or 5% of the respondent population is relatively small. But because it's so small, we look for a much larger gap of significance, and 45% is a gap of significance. I would be very concerned if this data was real about the experiences of women and finding out why they felt less valued. But I'd be freaking out over the gender diverse respondents. We still don't have qualitative data here. We don't know why the fire exists. We don't know why these individual groups are not feeling as valued. We know where the fire is, and that's a start. If you don't believe this is happening or could happen, I am currently working with a client on a survey, and when we looked at the results by gender, we saw nearly identical responses to what you see before you. Different questions, different values, but the gender diverse population is not feeling as engaged in the organization as other people are. This is where we start to get into the complexity of triangulation of data. Continuing on my example I've just used, we take our demographics and we add in our inclusion survey or engagement survey results, and we start to see the overlap. But again, it doesn't tell us the source of the fire. We need to add in something that is purely qualitative, like focus groups, to truly find what the issue is. Without the triangulation of data, we're missing the point. Now we start to get to the point where we can understand what solutions we need to develop in order to address the issue.